Okay, so thanks everybody for joining, and we apologize for the slight delay. Due to the time constraints, I will not hold much of the time. I would just want to welcome you to the second day of the Avenues of Cooperation conference. Today, we are starting with the presentation by Michal Vit, and I will give the floor immediately to Michal to give us his presentation. Thank you.
This is kind of a mirror of your screen.
Okay, so good morning, everyone here live or quasi live, no, in person and in live. So before I start, I would like to make a few personal remarks about this event and the whole initiative as a kind of the know-how expert in so to say in this field, having experience or like personal experience from the similar events in the Visegrad region, and trying to catch up with the context that is actually differentiating us from the within the region. Can I just this has foundings in the initiative raised by Visegrad Fund more than 10 years back, and also in 2010 and 2015 that the when Visegrad Fund initiated conference My Hero Your Enemy, basically discussing the ways of understanding or putting together narratives, ideas, identities that has been. It's not. It's okay like that, or okay. Good.
I don't think so. I think that we should see.
Okay, so basically how the identities that the Visegrad Fund and the Visegrad Cooperation initiated the cooperation among intellectuals, academics, and experts dealing with the education in the modern history and the interpretation of the historical events of past centuries, basically starting from the basics of the Visegrad Cooperation. And this initiative had from my perspective, two main streamlines. The first streamline was to find a place or a space where we can see the different perspectives on the similar events, and to find a, let's say, academic and the political reconciliation within the Visegrad group. The second second streamline was to find a common denominator for events and initiatives that took place in the region, mainly throughout 20th century. And in 2015, when the second edition of the My Hero Your Enemy conference was completed, there was actually a very interesting moment that after the event, we kind of concluded that there is nothing more to speak about within the Visegrad, which was very kind of eye-opening finding that from perspective of there will be actually less money for the activities, but on the other hand, it was a very good sign that the historical and identity-related topics are not topics that are dividing the region, and are topics that are basically that are matter of some in national context matter issues that matter in the national context, but don't have the aim and the possibility to crash the Visegrad cooperation, or let's say the broader understanding of Central Europe, despite the fact that the anniversary of Trianon Treaty was kind of discussed as something that could be a matter of dividing the Visegrad region. But as we discussed yesterday, even from the Hungarian perspective, this was something that didn't happen basically it didn't happen. And when we got together with Katarina and the institute, it was actually for me kind of revival of the ideas that matter, basically to discuss issues related to the very understanding of national/culture/social identity in the region. And I think it's a great opportunity from the perspective of the Visegrad countries to see events that are happening right now, and to provide kind of kind of facilitating activities or help, I would call it even, to tackle the issue from the perspective where we can find the common denominator, and where we can discuss what actually discuss things that actually can't be discussed in the, let's say, in the public debate, in the media, because they are becoming directly a matter of politicization and the matter of polarization. I was thinking about actually a few common things for the region that are that stand at the beginning of the whole process, both for the Central Europe and Southeast Europe. I think that in both regions, these elements are a little bit, or not little bit, they are neglected, and they just caused the fact that they have been moved forward and not discussed in the right time when they were supposed to be discussed. The first element is basically things that happened after, between during the interwar period and right after the Second War, both in the region of Southeast Europe and Central Europe, which is resettling of people, which is not just the fact of moving people from one place to another. And Czech Republic experienced this event heavily of moving 3 million ethnic Germans from Czechoslovakia, and the fact is not just about move people from place A to place B, and it can be not like in case of Poland, but mainly the problem is the need of creating new sense of belonging to the place, and the need of having already developed and applied sense how the new identity or how the new belonging will be created. What happened in 45 in Central Europe? These things basically have not been discussed throughout the communist time, and kind of popped up after in early 90s, where it could have a potential of some kind of political or identity clash, but these issues seem to be rather, I would call it even forgotten, at least from the perspective of the Czech Republic, and somehow also in case of Slovakia, despite the fact of a little bit tricky relations with Hungary. But the reason for that, I was really trying to find out why this issue did not emerge as being the dividing line in society and politics. And I always, when I think about this about this issue, I always have on mind the sketch from that was broadcasted in the public in the Czech TV. The representative of the Czech embassy here, I guess, know the Alles Gute, which was like the story about the sketch about portraying the German element in the Czech society as a kind of parody. And it was in 1994 when the Czech national TV broadcasted a sketch saying that the St. Vit Cathedral, which is like the symbol of the Czech statehood, should be given back to Germans, more specifically to Sudeten Germans, as kind of sign for the reconciliation, which was like, seeing this from the perspective of 25 years, it seems like putting this kind of sketch into the reality of 2021, regardless the geographical the position, it would call not just for the diplomatic clash, but almost calling for some violent events. But the point why I'm mentioning this here is that basically I was trying to find a way what would be the driver of overcoming the divide, and finding throughout the region the kind of distant position for understanding and not. I know that it sounds a little bit silly, but not taking things so seriously. So allow some kind of culture, social interpretation into whole story, but not allowing that this issue or these issues are taken only and solely by political polarization. So going back to the point, so the resettling of people is something that I personally consider as the biggest undiscussed historical crime in the Central and Southeast Europe, that is causing many problems, not just because the people have been resettled and new identities had to be created and new sense of belongings had to be created too, but that this event or these events created a space for various kinds of interpretation, not settled, let's say, strategy how to develop the sense of belonging, how to shape the society, not just in ethnic manner, but also from the social perspective, how to create, let's call it like everyday nationalism in terms of how the national institutions execute their power over people through public administration, through enforcing rule of law, etc. These issues, and this is the same for the Visegrad countries, the same more or less applies throughout the region. These issues have not been discussed. How actually what happened in post 45 in Central Europe, and what happened in the whole region of, let's say, let's call it Southeast Europe, not using the term of Western Balkan, how this everyday nationalism have been implemented. If there was a strategy, how this strategy was implemented. If there was no strategy, then how to accept the new reality that, at least from the analytical perspective or from the historical perspective, the some kind of epistemological knowledge is needed for the future understanding. And we have discussed it yesterday afternoon. Then it little bit sparked my mind how to set up some kind of system into this region from the identity and the belonging perspective. I would also touch 2 points that are, I'm using the privilege that we are in the small number here, which is I call it that we all miss our Germans, that we miss the whole region missed element that would, despite the war experience, the second war, etc. I don't want to get trapped into this, but I call it as some kind of element that drives the societies through economic cooperation, through the cultural cooperation, and creates let's say kind of united space in this part of Europe, in which everybody understands that if we were sitting here 100 years back, I guess most probably as gathering of intellectuals from Europe, we would most probably would spoken German, I guess, and not English. But this is like the general the reflection of the missing German element in Central Europe, and in broader terms of the Central Europe. And the second element is, and we discussed it also yesterday afternoon, we don't have our enemy. We don't have our, let's say, the enemy of Soviet Union, or let's say generally communism. Basically something that would create, or that would enable the whole region to identify with certain elements that would bring societies together as something like a shared social and historical experience. For Czechoslovakia, the August 68. For Hungary, the Budapest, the uprising in Hungary in 56. For Poland, the martial law and the Solidarność in 1980. Which, for the perspective of Central Europe, these are things that actually this experience made Central Europe to see, like, this is our enemy, and this is the reason why we gather together, and this is also the reason why representatives of new democracies in the early 90s found the common language and the common interest to shape the cooperation, to understand that the new reality in early 90s is to cooperate and not to fight against each other. And this is, and we touched it yesterday too in the afternoon, that we don't have here in the region this kind of element, that this very, like, this historical narration that would create this strong belonging, that we are together against something that would bring us together. On the other hand, herein there is something that in the Central Europe is not missing, which is very broad and very deep culture, linguistic, and actually even the political understanding that is missing in some elements of Central Europe. That should be, that we discussed it yesterday. It's a kind of like trigger point for the further discussion, and the way how actually to shift the whole discussion from the perspective of what is the dividing into towards finding the common denominator that are very often these elements are very often the matter of, let's say, everyday life. We can call it as everyday nationalism from both sides. That actually, at the very end of the day, it's not so dividing as it could be from the first perspective. So I would conclude here. I wanted to make a few other points, but to keep it, let's say, the consistency in the matter of like having the one idea at one place, I will stop here. Okay, well, so I hope that my permanent residence will be renewed. It's okay. So so from that perspective, I hope I will be allowed to enter the European Union back. Well, I understand that this is like this is something that is not very okay. So my point that is also related to this issue is that in the 90s, or let's say the 15 years between the collapse of communism and the entrance of our region into the EU, there was something that was called as European integration, and that was like the uniting force that put these countries together to streamline their focus to the one ultimate goal of foreign policy, which was the NATO and the EU membership. From that perspective, taking into consideration this kind of, let's say, foreign policy thing here, and putting the EU integration into place to the local context, from perspective of, let's say, the observer of the European integration process here in the region. So only diplomats here. Okay, so the so the EU enlargement process is it's basically done. Not because of the different aims of opening chapters and progress here, progress there, and the monitoring and etc. etc. This will be the matter of the political discussion and the matter of like the business relation for 10, 15, 20 years. But when I say that the end of the enlargement process, I mean it as in the situation where EU basically lost the ability to be the transformative and the decisive power, not in its hard elements, but it's in transformative means. And basically, since the European Commission allowed individual member states to feed the integration process with the bilateral issues related to culture, identity, history, etc., that this allowed the integration process basically lost its justification that was at the beginning, that is still driven by the economic means and the economic motivation. So whatever, any kind of event that will happen in near future will face the reality that basically to shift the integration process from this very culture, identity, rule of law driven elements will not be actually, it will be very hard to be fulfilled. The second, from the EU perspective, naming let's say the neighboring countries, let's be correct, it's basically that these aims are going against the very first principle of the EU integration, which means regional cooperation and the good neighborhood relations on the bilateral level. This very principle that was that was triggered by Central European context, mainly because of Slovakia and Hungary in 90s, suddenly is emerging from, or not, it's, even if we call it as that it's emerging from the EU states, but it's at least it's not facilitated by the EU to decrease the level of tension in this context. Which again, this is not a matter if someone from the European Commission comes here and says, "Oh, you have to do this, you have to do that, and you have no rule of law, and blah 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 blah. You have to fight corruption, reform judiciary, and this kind of, like, these things can be done in 2 years if really someone wants." But this narrative about the enlargement process, this is something that to reclaim. This will be extremely hard in context of putting EU integration in line with some kind of national identity processes, to merge it together, to be reliable partner for the whole region. I think it will be extremely hard, and I would call it even close to impossible, which obviously, you know, nobody will acknowledge, because it's the, you know, it would mean the end of the story for at least for 3 decades. So please, when you do reports to your capitals, be nice to me. You know, I want to enter the EU for the Christmas, you know. But you know, putting this EU enlargement element with you know, the, let's say, very unclear and very let's say very unclear identity processes, it's putting these 2 things together. It's a huge mistake that can be, you know, solved or can be facilitated by someone who has, you know, kind of mediation role in these processes, but not surely not on the bilateral level, which means also from the side of the EU, from the EU Commission. I'm done. I'm done.
Okay, so we're starting with questions. Nobody can see me in this dark. I think that's really a mistake of the room. It looks like he's speaking from some satellites. Just joking. It's still completely dark. Maybe I should suggest what is
below the line. Under the line.
Yeah.
In a kind of a light there, and still it's very dark. I think it's something with the camera. Is it visible? Yes. Very blurry. Maybe it's a good thing. Is this working? Okay, so they can hear me. Okay, thanks, Michal, for this great talk. The first part was basically lessons that we can learn regarding the dispute at hand, the dispute we are discussing throughout this conference. I wanted to pick up on your closing remarks. The EU enlargement, at least as we know it, maybe that was your point, is over. It was more in, if I took it correctly, it was more in the sense of values rather than, you know, the technical processes itself of enlargement. But don't you think that EU and what is understood by enlargement could reinvent itself. In a way, what I have in mind is the following.
Let know.
Okay, now it works.
Can I just sit in front of the
Yeah.
computer? Let's not be over technically savvy and waste time. Okay, this is even more weird. I look from, like, speaking from the castle, a castle from in Transylvania. Never mind. This is really weird light. Anyway, can we remove this thing? Okay. Okay, let's keep it simple and talk from the Zoom room instead of the real-time stage. So I guess they could hear nothing. Spasimir, am I right? You couldn't hear anything of what I said. The mic was not connected, or you couldn't hear the last part.
I couldn't hear the last part. When you stopped recording, the voice
Should I repeat
disappeared.
myself from the beginning?
No. I couldn't hear literally the last 1 minute, so don't worry, but I reacted immediately.
Now we cannot hear you.
Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, well, it was just the last minute. When you stopped recording, this is when it stopped also.
Okay,
the sound.
should I start from the very beginning, Specimen?
Yes, please, go ahead. Do you hear me? Katya, do you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, now yes.
Okay, yes, you can start from the beginning. Well, as I said, it was just the last minute when you stopped recording. This is when the voice disappeared.
Oh, okay, so the recording was going from there.
Yeah.
So is there a live link again?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, I stopped at the point when I said, I asked basically Michal if he thought that maybe the enlargement process could reinvent itself. Firstly, due to the increased strong interest from the Visegrad group, which I believe we identify correctly, that there is such strong interest on the part of this group of countries. Second of all, I believe that even in what used to be the center of Euro technocracy in the past, like in the Western countries of Europe, such as France, for example, that we also see a change of tide of political discourse, and we see here a more
a realist political discourse on the part of, for example, the French president Macron. He keeps speaking about the real borders, geographical and therefore also political borders, like, you know, very territorially, like what are the borders of Europe and how are we to protect those borders? And he keeps, you are aware of the statements probably, and he keeps raising over and over again of, you know, kind of bulwarking the territory, not just the concept and, you know, the superstructure called EU, but the territory continent itself, delineating it and protecting it from non-European influence. I remember statements where he raised the problem of, you know, patches of the territory that are within Europe but still outside of EU as a problem. Then again, let's not forget that in the European elections in May 2019, his candidates kept raising, even Daniel Cohn-Bendit, his one of his proponents in this elections, kept raising the question of a European army. And in the discourse they used, they constantly insisted that they wanted to break away from the control of the United States and have a proper European army that would protect Europe, etc., etc. So I'm not an expert on any of these particular issues. What I'm noting is simply a more realist, territorially protectivist, let's put it that way, relation toward Europe, and some discourse of Euro sovereignty, let's say. We notice it not only in Macron. I don't think we really see it in Germany anywhere. I notice it in Macron from the West, and I notice it among some of the statements of the Visegrad country leaders, like, you know, protecting Europe, Europeanness, etc. Okay, that may have a different ideological tone, but we are not talking now about the differences, but rather the commonalities between the two discourses. So can we really identify this possible change in not just discourse, but conceptualization of what is unified Europe?
Well, I think, you know, the first problem that comes with this term is, you know, what is this lacks some kind of, you know, justification, or this big idea behind, or the driver that would push these ideas to go through, to be accepted on the local, not on just on the local level, but also within the Europe. So if this happens, and I don't think that that it's not so science fiction, and it might happen through this push that French and partly also Germans, despite the disagreement, it might happen. But this kind of like deeper integration in this in this area would mean, or would cause the differentiated Europe as, you know, kind of supranationally structured closed circle of, let's say, 10 to 12 states, rather mainly on the west, and the rest of the European Union as something that is kind of in the middle, but not fully integrated, but participating, for instance, on the common market, which would maybe that would allow countries standing outside the European Union now to join the club without, let's say, this political narrative. If it is feasible, if it is doable, I honestly, I doubt, because when it comes also what the key German, not key German, you see who is in my mind, the key EU member states embassies throughout the region, they don't, I'm sorry for if I'm touching someone, they don't know with whom to team up, with whom to develop this local foundings, or the kind of politically invest in not just the persons, but also in ideas that would trigger political and structural changes, not in, let's say, 4 to 8 years, but let's say in a decade, because this process is it will take at least 1 or 2 decades. Maybe it can happen sooner with unpredictable events, but you have to prepare. You have to prepare this the public awareness first, and then you can implement something, which I personally don't see any significant move in the direction. Which is still, it's the idea is all the time the same. You have to have idea, you have to elaborate the idea, and you have to implement the idea, which here, which in the region is like, it's like a childish game who has better playground, which is putting the EU enlargement into this games is like, I think the West had already better ideas what to do with the region, and not just to observe.
Exchange. Okay, done. Maybe somebody from here, from the Zoom room, would want to join. Christian is here, perhaps. I mentioned France. So,
If anybody wants to jump in, feel free to just unmute yourself and raise the question. Okay.
You can come here.
You can come here, please.
No.
Thank you, Professor, for your very interesting lecture. I come from the EU delegation, but don't worry, we're not going to veto you when you want to go again to Prague. But just wanted to discuss some of your last statements you made regarding the enlargement process, that I have some different opinions in that regard. So that could be interesting to say, like, when you say that EU enlargement process is done, I wouldn't necessarily agree with that, because the EU is investing actually a lot of political capital and economic support in the region, and it's increasing even throughout the years. And basically, like, our criteria for joining the EU, they are not based on identity. That's what one of the 27 member states, and I think everyone knows which state we are talking about, tries to link that to issues related to identity, language, culture. But this is not the official position of the EU. We have like very clear objectives that have to be fulfilled. And for example, you say like that the European Commission says that the rule of law, corruption, and so on can be dealt in 2 years. I wouldn't really agree with that. I'm dealing with some corruption cases here in North Macedonia, and we can see that this is a structural problem in the Western Balkans, and even in some countries that joined lately, like Bulgaria and Romania, which they had this kind of speedy procedure to enter, and they still have like very serious problems of corruption, yet they joined the EU. It's true that the enlargement criteria right now, they are more difficult than they used to be, but there's also shifting positions, for example, from France, from the Netherlands, with the statements of Macron, with the last visit of Rutte in Macedonia. So I think that the enlargement process is not done. I cannot say anything about the time frame because we are expecting that Bulgaria will change its mind. That's actually we're trying to lobby in that regard and trying to say to them that this is actually not a real criteria that should be followed, should be applied to join the EU. But then there should also be a political willingness from the other side. And I think in the case of Macedonia and Albania, this is very clear. In the case of Serbia and Montenegro, that is not that clear. And this is why the negotiations are a bit stuck. And Bosnia and Kosovo, there are different issues that would take us longer to discuss. So just to sum up, I would like to say that the integration is not linked with identity. I mean, at least that's our Copenhagen criteria. They don't link it with identity, but with economic, political criteria, respect of rule of law, democracy, human rights, and that's our focus. So if you have some thoughts about that, thanks.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for the raising the counter arguments. I have basically 3 points. The first is, look, with all respect to this region, the corruption was invented here. We basically more or less know who entered the privatization market first and what consequences it had. And this is something what always like not drives me mad, but simply corruption was not invented here. The second point, the biggest problem of this region is that it has no middle class and it has no structure, social and economical structure to make some structural deviation less visible than in Central Europe and than in European Union generally. The problem of small country with facing the severe problems is that you see a lot of things here that even in the Czech Republic you don't see them because you simply can't, you don't see them because you don't need them to survive. And of course in this structural setting you see more things that are deviating from the ultimate goal as also I understand the rule of law as a basic principle of the modern society, but at the same time you see things that you can identify 2 weeks after the elections, how the money for the campaign of the winning side have been generated. In big EU countries, it takes you longer time to find a way that the global payment processing company was basically the money laundering scheme. It's just a matter of perspective, and we see here things because we go on the street and you can just point finger to the corruption on money laundering things because it's simply more visible. And the third point is, with all the respect to the EU institutions, you are not running the show here. These are the member states, and they are just making your life hard, which is, we should be honest to ourselves and to also individual member states that, we don't hold, or the European Commission is not holding the the element of power that would force anybody to do something more than is needed. It's that is the structural setting of the enlargement process, and it always used to be like that. That it's the motivation of member states who drive the process. But thanks for the raising the voice.
Let's speak to Marta and ask her, because her daughter is sick, if she has the time to wait for this extended discussion. Marta,
Absolutely. Marta, can you hear us?
For the discussion to go on?
Yeah, I can hear you.
It's no problem.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Okay, so Spasimir and then Stefan.
Yes, let's proceed with the question from Spasimir. Then we have a question from Stefan here, and then we will continue with the presentation by Marta. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry, this is not really a question in a sense, but more a comment to what was just being said. I have to admit that I'm extremely happy that Michal's speech provoked the comment from a representative of the EU in the region, because this is extremely encouraging. I have to admit that I was very happy to hear that the EU enlargement policy is not over, because we as scholars and think tankers that try to look at the region, we constantly appeal for a more proactive steps that should look a bit more critically at the EU's approach towards the region. This stalemate in the relations between the EU and these countries doesn't work well for anyone. And actually, I think that part of Michal's answer highlighting the importance of the nation states in that respect is absolutely important. The second thing that I would like to highlight is that I, in a sense, disagree with the diagnosis related to the EU enlargement, and in particular the argument about Bulgaria and Romania, because it is extremely important, especially in the context of what we are talking about. Bulgaria and Romania were not countries that joined based on a speedy track, but exactly they were on the detour because they joined 3 years later than the other 10 countries, exactly because of the problems that they faced with the Copenhagen criteria, and in particular the political dimension of these criteria. What is even more, they were accepted with the sense of job undone, and this is why the CVM was created. It's a pity that this mechanism was blurred in the context of the rule of law scoreboard and disappeared only now to be reinvented again in the context of exerting pressure over the same reforms that become an obstacle over the last 15 years. And last but not least, there is a certain phenomenon that takes place, and it is the relationship between the EU, North Macedonia, and Bulgaria in the context of this identity crisis. It is absolutely true that the question of identity is not a part of the Copenhagen criteria, and even if it is not a part of the Copenhagen criteria, then it is what exactly Michal said. It is part of the vested opportunities in the hands of the member states to determine the nature of the enlargement process. But we should never forget that the European integration as a process makes sense only to the extent that it is based on a consensual basis of its member states. If this consensual sense of joint effort disappears, then I'm very much afraid that the future for the European integration can be much more, I would say, grayish. And in that sense, this is a problem. that requires a very deep reflection beyond the short-term interest. What exactly needs to be done in order to facilitate the sense of commonness, of shared vision of European integration, of shared vision of the future between Macedonia and Bulgaria, in order to be able to shape this perspective, this European perspective. So we should not try to escape within the perspective of 27-1 and exerting pressure that will resolve the problem, because it will only put fuel to the problem, and the consequences will be even more dire for the integration process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Spasimir, very much. We have a question from Stefan, and then we can proceed to the second panel. Thank you.
In fact, I don't have any questions, but just to comment or to add something from what we heard from Michal, and after that from Spasimir. You said about the missing German element about as far as Central Europe is concerned. I think that in our region here, it is possible to make a parallel with the case with the Greek presence and Greek culture in a historical way, because they are important for the history of countries like Bulgaria, Romania, Albania, what is now the Republic of North Macedonia, and it is not sufficiently admitted in their narratives. As you mentioned, if it was, let's say, about 100 years ago, maybe the intellectuals in our countries will speak German. If it was, let's say, until 1830s, 1840s, the intellectuals in our countries will speak Greek. And here is the parallel, maybe one more parallel. I don't know whether it is well known, but let's say when in Sofia in 1910 was organized the Slavic Congress, it was supposed the delegates to speak among them in one of the Slavic languages. It was very conservative event dominated by, at that time, very conservative Tsarist Russia. But in reality, the delegates of this Congress spoke German and French. And it was their language of communication. Going a step further to the German problem in Central Europe and Greek problem in historical perspective in Southeast Europe, I would add also that there is one difference between Central Europe and Southeast Europe, because the Germans were defeated in the end of the Second World War, and German historiography from the 1960s forward revised completely the historical narrative, something that is not the case completely in Greece, and even less in Bulgaria, which means that it is hard to expect, as it was so visible in the Greek Macedonian conflict and in the Bulgarian Macedonian conflict also, to expect people from Southeast Europe to be self-reflective and self-critical at the extent that it is already a kind of ordinary thing in Central Europe. So my point here is that in order to expect the Macedonian side to be more self-critical about their narrative. They should have in front of them more Europeanized Bulgarian historical narrative in order to hear what some Bulgarians' eyes would like to hear. About European Union enlargement and identity, and as far as identity is very much connected with history, I would say that it is true that historical narrative is not part of the Copenhagen criteria. I also would like to add that unfortunately, maybe the peak of the nationalistic narrative about Bulgarian history occur somewhere between 2001 and 2010, which means that entering the European Union in 1st of January 2007, Bulgaria entered with the kind of the great Bulgarian narrative, at least at the popular level, and which was something that I didn't hear in the late communist period or in the beginning of post-communist period, which is ironically. After that, when Gruevski came in Macedonia, as a result of his provocations, this narrative became even stronger as far as Macedonia was concerned. And when, as a result of the global policy, Bulgaria and Macedonia signed the treaty on 1st of August 2017, they have all this historical burden from the last, let's say, 10 to 20 years, and even more, I would say 70 years and more. But it doesn't mean, and I'm finishing here, it doesn't mean that we should not use the process of EU enlargement in order to Europeanize the historical narrative of a member country like Bulgaria and candidate like Republic of North Macedonia. And that is why I am here with in this project organized by the Institute of Humanities and Social Sciences in Skopje. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for your interventions and for your comments and questions as well. So on a technical side note, before we proceed with Marta's presentation, I would like to ask everybody who is joining us online to switch to the link for which is designated specifically for Marta's presentation, and we will proceed immediately.
We should change the link.
They must go out and go in.
Everybody must leave this meeting and then
Okay.
join the next one. Thank
Okay.
you.